Hello and welcome to the Coaches Forum, brought to you by FungoMan and Precision Sports Robotics. I'm Rami Kujin, CEO and co-inventor of FungoMan. I want to thank you for joining us for Extended Spring Training 2020. We're going to have an interview with Texas Rangers bench coach Don Wakamatsu, and so we're excited to have Don on. He'll be back here. He'll join us here in just a minute, but before we do, I wanted to just go over a couple of housekeeping rules, if you will. We're gonna mute everyone just so that we can have, for the sake of sound quality, and also just know that we want your input, and we have a section up on the chat. If you haven't seen that already, look around on the bottom of your screen and you should find the place where you can chat your questions to Don, or just any kind of comment or question you might have. We'll be sure to answer those after we let Don share tonight. So just want to say thank you again. We're super grateful for Wak to spend the time with us. And once he comes on, we'll get started. Let me know if you once you're online, Wak, let me know. We're here in Dallas, by the way. In the middle of my home, as a lot of you probably are, and so this is a great time. It's an amazing time, but we're grateful for y'all joining us tonight, and hopefully we can get some great information and just hear more from a guy that's been around a long time, but also has done an incredible amount, has a great experience. So we're super excited about that.
Rami, can you hear me?
Hey, Wak.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. I'm so glad you could make it. This is an amazing thing. We're sitting here on, I know you're in the Metroplex as well, but I'm so excited to be able to visit with you tonight.
Well, I can't thank you enough for having me. I'm a little cooped up here and ready to do some coaching, I guess.
I like that backdrop behind you, man.
I had to step it up, you know. I had to step it up. There's some people that are paying good money for this, I guess.
Well, I really am glad you're here, and we got. I don't know if everybody can see this on their screens, but we put together pulled some of the highlights on your resume. But I got to tell you, the screen is only so big, so we could only pull a few of them. But I do want to say, I put Arizona State up there when we played together back when I was there in '83 and '84. I think you got there in '82 or '81.
Yeah. Yeah, 1982. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, definitely.
It was an honor.
I remember one of the funniest stories. We went down to UT, played Texas. You remember when Schiraldi and Clemens and Brumley and all that bunch were playing? I think we were ranked 1 or 2, and they were ranked 1 or 2. I think we were 1 and they were 2. But I remember the thing I remember the most is how their fans ragged our names. I mean, with Wakamatsu, Kujin, and a guy named Odabe. I mean, they had a field day on us.
Yeah, I remember, there's things that throughout your career you never forget. And I remember one of the fans yelling out, "Wakamatsu, they make that in a 4-door." So, yeah. You remember those things.
Yeah. Well, you were quite the player there. And, one of the things I remember as a player, playing on the same team, is that you, as a catcher, you were great with our pitching staff. You really had your demeanor, which has always been, real under control, calm. You settled. You did what a good catcher should do. Is you settled them down, and you were strong enough to where you could look them in the eye and they would listen. But I think that's translated into your coaching. So the first question I have is, obviously you've been around baseball a long time, but where did you get that? Was that something that just you had, or where did that come from?
Well, two things. I think I was fortunate to play on a team in high school. It was called Bergovich, and it was an all-star team from the San Francisco Bay Area, and we played over 100 games in the summer. So I was exposed to a lot of baseball in the summer, similar to what a lot of kids are doing now with the club team. But we literally played, we played 7 games on the weekends, and we had some talent. Randy Johnson was on that team. Johnny Abrego was a first round with the Cubs. Dave Hingle ended up being in the big leagues with the White Sox. Dale Swim, obviously with the Brewers. We had an all-star team. So I think getting exposed to that level of play and the confidence to win, I think was number one. Getting the opportunity to go to Arizona State was my dream. Obviously, they won the national title before we got there. So they were the cream of the crop. The second thing I think is the fact that back in the day, we allowed players to do a little bit more than we do now with calling games. So Brock and I'll tell you a quick story about Brock. And I don't know if you remember, I think it was UC Riverside or something. And we had 3 young starters that were just getting their lunch handed to them for the last 2 weeks. We weren't eligible for the playoffs at that time. And so he got real frustrated because they were struggling. He said, listen, I'm going to call the pitches from now on. Because I'd called for 3 years. I called every pitch there. Right. And we had some success. And so I said, okay, you go ahead and do that, Coach Brock. And I think the 3 out of the next 4 guys hit home runs. He goes, never mind, you take it. So I think a lot of it has to do with and coaching in general. And I always felt like this. I think, you have to ask the right questions, not tell guys what to do. You have to lead them down that path so they can discover their own tools and talents and their skill level on their own.
Well, that happened early, that's very interesting. I didn't know that story. That makes a lot of sense. I mean,
you thought I called those pitches.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny in a lot of ways. As a professional player, you went out and obviously played in the big leagues, played a long time. I didn't realize you had a 12-year career as a player and also player manager, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Just knowing that you did both at the same time, that's very interesting. What are some of the things that stood out as you were going through early on in your career as and you did so many different things, with whether it was a field director, coach, a roving instructor. I mean, you covered all the bases, and I mean, you really did.
Well, I think I was real fortunate, first and foremost. Had some real influential people in my life, coaches, managers. But I think the biggest thing as a player is, and I wasn't, a great player, but I had an opportunity to play in the big leagues. And I think that the key is handling failure. We came out of one of the top programs in the country, feeling pretty good about ourselves. And then you go out there and there's 170 minor leaguers who, depending on what affiliate you sign with, and they can all play. They were the best of the best wherever. It doesn't matter if they were high school or junior college. And all of a sudden now there's a reality check. And you say, I thought I was the best in the country. You know what? These guys can play here. And by the way, I'm hitting 220. Right. So you kind of go through, and a wood bat in your hand at that time. We didn't swing a lot of wood bats coming up. We were all aluminum. And so just making those adjustments, and this game is, it's all about failure, how you handle failure. It's easy to handle success, but can you get back up when you're down, when you take that 0 for 12 with 8 strikeouts? Do you look at it more of a math problem rather than, a personal issue? And I think just getting back up and never giving up. And I was real fortunate. I had been released and went back home, and my grandfather had worked on a farm his whole life. And he said, hey, listen, you can work the rest of your life, go back and play again. And I went back and I ended up making the big leagues.
Wow.
So, you get challenged daily of whether you're good enough to play in the big leagues or you're ever going to have that opportunity. But the games, it's wonderful. I've been fortunate to be with 15 different teams as a player and a coach. There are not too many guys who can say that, but when you're coming up and there's an all-star, my son's with Cleveland and Lindor's the shortstop. Well, my son can't sit there and say, well, I'm never going to play in the big leagues. Lindor's there. Well, Lindor might get traded, Lindor might get hurt, and all you can control is what you can control, and that's getting better every day.
That's really good. That's interesting. As you talk about that, just watching players while you were going through that early part of your coaching career. What do you think helped you the most as a future manager? You managed in the big leagues, and you were able to do some things that quite frankly are amazing in terms of the game of baseball. Not many people can say they managed in the big leagues, which you've done. But what do you think contributed to your preparation for that as a coach in the minor leagues?
Well, people might laugh, but getting released twice, right? So I went from I was almost a Crash Davis of baseball. Went through, I believe, 7 teams as a minor league player. Got a cup of coffee in the big leagues with the White Sox. Realized that I could play there. I had some injuries after I went back down that prevented for me playing longer. But I think being able to see different styles of baseball, getting to see different organizations, the way they treated players, good and bad. And so when I had that opportunity to start to coach, I had a pretty big Rolodex. I had a pretty big reference of how players were treated and how they should be treated. Again, not too many guys, they go in one organization, they play, they get released, they go into coaching and they know one organization. I knew 7. Right. So that was a blessing, even though at the time I thought it was a curse. Right. So, but it allowed me to meet a lot of different coaches. And I never wanted to be, and obviously being a catcher is a little bit different because you are the quarterback in a lot of ways. You're controlling the running game, you're controlling the pitchers, you're understanding how to call a game, you're looking at positioning, you're doing all those things ahead of time. So when I was able to start my coaching career, again, I think I had a little bit of an advantage. And so I went out, and when I first started coaching with the Arizona Diamondbacks, when I got done playing, I was fortunate to be in a real good organization with some real detail-oriented people. Buck Showalter, Brian Butterfield, Glenn Sherlock. Again, I think you look back and you go, I was real fortunate, and my career wouldn't be where it's at today if I wasn't around those guys that were so detail-oriented. And so, and I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was a hitting instructor. I was a catching instructor. I managed rookie ball. I did all these different things. And then finally, when I got the opportunity to run the minor league system with 170 players and another 40, 50 coaches with the Anaheim Angels, it taught me a lot about organization and running things and directing and delegating and communication and protocol and all those things. And again, having gone through it as a player with 7 different organizations and knowing what it feels like to be released, to not play, to get pinch hit for it, all the things that maybe some of these other guys never get exposed to, I can look a player in the face and say, I know what you're going through. I've been there. So that, I think there's a lot of things that led up to the success that I've had to be in this game for so long. Wow.
15 organizations and then 7 as a player. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing in itself. Just the amount of exposure to the different philosophies even, right? I mean, you saw some, I'm sure not everyone does it the same way at every organization. They all have some basic things I would think, but there's probably some nuances as well, right?
Well, again, I think it's just the detail is probably number 1, and number 2 would probably be, or equal to that, would be communication. And so when I had that opportunity to do that, I was fortunate that I ended up running the minor leagues for Anaheim. We ended up winning the World Series in 2002. So I had the John Lackeys and the Sean Figgins and some pretty good players that came through that, Mike Napoli, and I got a player with us in the Texas Rangers, Jeff Mathis. All these guys came through that system, but you and I talk about it all the time. When I was put in that role to develop these guys, I think baseball came last. You know, you're talking about guys that were fresh out of high school, away from their families, trying to understand what it's like to be out on your own. And then now you're getting a paycheck for what you used to just do for free. And now all of a sudden, you know, the pressure of, like I mentioned before, are you good enough to play at this level? Are you good enough to be a big leaguer? You know, so to be able to kind of mold those men, build relationships with them, get them to understand that, you know, the one thing I could say is I was with 15 organizations because I kept my nose clean, you know, that I represented the organization as best I could. And I think, you know, it takes a long time for players to understand that organizations want you to succeed. Mm. You know, if you're not playing, they want you to hit 350. So you got to take accountability in that and understand that, you know, if you play well, I look good, you know. And so those are all things that the mental side of it, being away from home, developing, you know, the self-check, your ego, all those things come into play when you're going through the minor league system.
That's good. You know, I was thinking through some of the times we've met throughout the years. Obviously, we played in college together, but 21 years ago in 1999, I don't know if you remember this, you were a AA manager in El Paso, and you were playing in the Texas League. Your team was playing in the Texas League. You came through Shreveport, where the Giants were at the time, the AA Giants, and we got together, and it was the first time that I remember you sharing what book you were reading. You happened to share the book Good to Great, which I'm sure many people have either read or have heard of. It's an amazing book, and that was and since then I don't think there's been a time that you haven't shared something, either a book or some idea or somebody that, you know, you're always and you're very well read. You're very much in learning, and that's always been very, very impressive to me. You know, it talks about in the Bible how iron sharpens iron, and you've definitely you've done that with your peers as well as the players around you. But I did want to say, and it's leading into our next area that I really am looking forward to hearing you talk about, and that is the state of the game. And in that book, Good to Great, there's a what they call the Stockdale paradox, based on James Stockdale, the former vice presidential candidate, naval officer, and Vietnam prisoner of war for 7 years, who said, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality." And we know the COVID-19 era it's not going to last forever, and baseball will start again. But in the meantime, how do you see the state of the game? And secondarily, how has your role as a coach or instructor changed in that time?
Amazing question, number one. Well, as far as the education, I think, you know, times do change, and you have to adapt with players as you get older. And so for me, being almost, well, I'm 57, and so we're dealing with players that are 20, 21, 19, 20, 21. So you have to understand how their mind works, and you have to have something relatable. And so reading and education, and whether it's psychology or whether it's a biography of somebody that you idolize or respect, I think those are all things, learning lessons, and you have to continue. I remember Tony La Russa, had dinner with Tony years ago, and I said, "What do you do during the season?" He said, "Well, I listen to comedy radio, and then in the winter I read biographies, so I have something new to give the players." You know, and I remembered that. And so you got to, and during the season when it's crunch time and the pressure of all that, you have to stay light. And in the winter, you do have to address a club with new material, with new things that can improve them, because players want to know what's in it for them, and rightly so. You know, they're on this path to be the greatest player ever, and they're going to utilize people like myself, and that's why you get into coaching. That's why you get goosebumps. You know, so the state of the game, I recommend, if you haven't read it already, probably the best book as far as trying to understand the state of the game right now is MVP Machine. And it talks a lot about analytics. It talks a lot about training methods. It talks a lot about the depth of what we're looking at now. And in the last 10 years, there's people that have entered our game that had maybe 20 years ago had no shot at getting in our game. And I don't say that from a negative. We're bringing some awfully bright people that are challenging us to look at the game in a different way. I went to Pitcherpalooza. I went to Texas Baseball Ranch. I've been in the game 36 years. I went to learn this winter to hear what people are saying. Driveline up in Seattle has turned out a lot of good coaches and are doing a lot of, velocity trainings, pitch FX, spin rate, spin efficiency. There's all these things that you're looking at now to try to give yourself a single edge. We have Zoom calls, a couple times a week to discuss, is there something we're missing right now with COVID and being isolated that we can help these guys maintain an edge, whether it's equipment or whether it's artificial intelligence, or if it's programs that they can react to, maybe whatever it is. We're gonna talk about it daily. We had a simulation the other day about what if we started in Arizona. How are we going to handle 50 players in an isolated situation? And we probably had 35 guys on that call. Wow. And so we are looking at every avenue. To win a World Series is an amazing thing. You got to be better than a lot of people, and you can't make mistakes, and you got to have the edge, and you got to look at, everything you could possibly do to kind of give your players and your team an advantage.
Wow. Yeah, so you guys aren't just sitting at home, doing yard work all the time, huh? You guys are actually working.
I share yard work. Don't get me wrong.
Well, if you're at home, Laura's going to make sure of that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I love that. No, that's very challenging, and just the idea of working when things are different. And yet you just have to, right? You just got to do whatever you can to keep getting better, especially when the competition is so strong. That's great.
I look at it. I mean, we've been through a lot in the last 100 years, and I'm always a half full guy. We will play again, and in a lot of ways you got to take the positive of maybe being with your family more, right? Of communicating, of looking at different ways of doing things. And so I don't look at the negative and say, you know what, this is all bad and it's never going to get any better. I don't look at it that way. To me, we will play baseball. I got a brand new stadium where I got to coach in.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. That thing is going to be nice too. Yeah. I'm looking forward to going out there myself. Yeah.
They say the clubhouse is going to be an acre. Okay, the New York Yankees clubhouse is 3/4 of an acre. I won't be able to find guys to pinch hit. In the jacuzzi, the sauna, who knows? We're going to have 14 cages. Who knows?
That's incredible. Oh, that's incredible. Well, there's another book out there, and we kind of want to. I need to ask you a couple of questions for people that are listening in. I know they want to hear some things maybe about, how you see training and whether it's mental, physical, and then we'll talk about the analytics hopefully a little bit and how that plays into it. But there's a book called the Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, where he talks about the deep practice. I'm sure you've heard of it, but he talks about how every human movement, thought, or feeling is a precisely timed electric signal traveling through a chain of neurons, a circuit of nerve fibers. Myelin, which is this insulation that wraps these nerve fibers and increases signal strength, speed, and accuracy. The more we fire a particular circuit, the more myelin optimizes that circuit, and the stronger, faster, and more fluent our movements and thoughts become. I can remember reading this, and I was fascinated by this, but I know this is just one piece of this big puzzle that that you're involved in on a daily basis. So how does this apply this thought, and I just want to open it up to others, but how does this apply to the training you guys do and the coaching and performance? How do you pull all that stuff together?
That's a great question, number one. I think where the game's changed over the last 10 years is the quality and the amount of facilities that are available to these players in all facets, whether it's nutrition, whether it's yoga, whether it's a massage therapist, whether it's hitting, whether it's pitching. These guys now are training year round. They're going to their own guy, as we call it. And I think, the same thing as far as is club baseball, where my sons were fortunate to be good enough. They both got drafted, but in the process, they were asked to play on several different teams, right? So what I'm seeing more than anything is we're on a skill level, we're probably as advanced as we've ever been in our game. Hitting in the cages, bat speed, launch angle, all these tools, spin efficiency, as I mentioned before, all these things are leading us to more efficient movement patterns. So what's missing? What's missing is our ability to teach and get these guys to understand at some point they have to compete without thought. And so when we talk about deep training or random training, all that really means in a sense is that we're taking away the time for these guys to have thought. And we have to do that, whether it's repetition, whether it's game-like speed. Those are things that are going to get these guys to make mistakes and to be reactive offense. Somebody said something this a while back. He said, we don't teach any kid to walk. They walk on their own. No matter how much you think as a parent, you teach kids to walk. So what we try to do is create environments that challenge these guys. We call them chaos drills. A lot of guys are doing them around the country, whether it's a 93-mile-an-hour slider that they'll never see in a game, or unless it's Wade Davis, those kind of guys. But challenging these guys, maybe body movement wise, or like I said, I remember as a player, I ended up having Tommy John surgery. I hurt my elbow. Coming back from Tommy John surgery, it's very difficult for the mind to let go of the body movement pattern. It wants to control it because it remembers pain. So what I learned was the fact that I had to play hot potato. I had to start doing things faster so my mind would get out of the way. So on one side, we have all this tremendous training going on, but on the other side, they still have to go out and compete. If you look at the faces, if you look at our game now probably has some of the best young group of players I've ever seen in 30 years. Whether it's the Juan Sotos or the Guerreros or the Bichettes, we get some phenomenal players. These guys are young and they have no fear. And the beauty of it is players today are exposed to the perfect games, the Under Armours. They're exposed to national tournaments. So I think it's like the Roger Bannister. When Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, all of a sudden it gave a belief system and everybody started running 4-minute mile. You get to see these Juan Sotos at 20 years old doing things that people never did. Sure, we grew up with the Ken Griffey Juniors and those type of guys, but they were few and far between. Every team now seems to have one of those guys. So that belief system's there, but going back to what I was talking about before, watch their body language, watch their expression. They're not thinking about mechanics. They're not thinking about, I should have took that pitch. They're involved in the pitch from day one, they stay in the now, as we say, and they compete. And so there's got to be that transition. And I see guys now that have been through, 5 months of working out in a facility, of doing soft toss and all these drills. And then they get in the game and it's almost like you can see their mind, them thinking during the action, and they have to train non-thought. You got to go back to zero. You got to trust the training that you've done for 5 months.
Wow, that transition alone, there's why do we need coaches? There's a reason right there. It's just being able to bridge that gap, because I'm sure you've seen the disconnect, right? The question marks, like, I was swinging great and everything was good. And then I stepped out on, I went to spring training and then everything fell apart and I can't figure out why. That's really interesting. I can see that connection point that you guys can make as coaches. There's a you actually introduced this guy, this movement culture guru, if you will. His name is Portal, and he's got this thing called, or he's in this thing called Fighting Monkey, and you sent me this link one day, and I stared at it for I couldn't believe it. This guy is doing things that just are different. How much, I know you mentioned yoga and some other things that are really more popularized now, but this is even more unique. I've never seen anything like that. What else is there out there right now that you're seeing that is taking players and really giving them what they need in terms of technique, movement, and then, like you said, tying it together? Where is it going?
Well, I think when they talk about the 10,000 hour rule, right? And I think there's some schools that believe in that, other schools don't. Some guys are gifted it from birth to do special things. The one thing that's lacking, I think, that's changed in our game is being so specialized at what we do. And the game is constantly changing during the course of a game, and your ability to make adjustments, both from a physical and mental standpoint, are the keys to the successful guys. It might be a starting pitcher that doesn't have it today. Okay, how do you make adjustments off of it? So this type of training, whether it's functional body movement, I even thought about playing around this year of playing guys in different positions in spring training that they've never played before, because it gets them to move their body in a different way. It's like, I remember way back in the day when I was running Anaheim, we'd have guys hit, if they were right-handed, we have them hit off-handed every day. Just something to equalize their body movement, get their mind to work in a different way. So you just got to be creative. There's a bunch of stuff on the internet, that leads to that. But one of the things that we talk a lot about in spring training is assessment, is truly understanding your strength and weaknesses as a player. And until we know, and we have, we'll bring in 80, 90 guys to spring training sometimes, that we have to go through those players on an individual basis and saying, okay, well, he's not very good at his backhand, or his slider's no good, or needs work on his changeup. So the assessment part is what's critical before we ever start coaching. I'll tell you a story real quick. I was the third base coach for Texas, and I went to Oakland as the bench coach for Bob Guerin. And Eric Chavez was a 6-time Gold Glover at third base. And I think I told you this story, Rami.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Chavi one day. I said, who was the best infield instructor you ever had? He said, Ron Washington by far. I go, really? What did he teach you? And he thought for a moment. He couldn't remember. But if guys that know Ron Washington, he's a very upbeat, positive guy, and he sells belief. So I think on one hand, you have a new school of coaches that all they really care about is technique, right? And you said it before, what do we need coaches for? We need coaches to sell belief and to remind guys that, hey, everybody struggles now and then, and that you got to get back on the horse. The guys that can do both, that understand the mechanics of the latest data, that have a database of that, and then can also keep these guys mentally on an even keel, are the guys that have success.
Wow, really good. That really kind of leads me into the next little section, and that is, we're going to talk about and you've alluded to it a lot already, but using measurements. It is what is the human side of analytics. I remember in the minor leagues walking through the locker room and knowing that in the middle of the room, this is in the 80s, that there would be this sheet of paper with the most recent stats. And so depending on where you were, if you're doing well, you can't wait to go over there and get that piece of paper and just kind of look at yourself at the top of the list. But if you're not, it can actually just demoralize you and crush you. And so you have to prepare yourself for that. Well, as you obviously know, we have that even more now where it's not only on the table in the locker room, but it's up on the jumbotron, it's on the internet, it's everywhere. So, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the tools and how the human side of making those useful. How does that work?
Well, I think there's two different sides of it. One is in-game situation, and the other one's individual player stats. Right. I remember going into Oakland. I think it's been up there twice now, last couple of years. And on the board, that next to every person's batting average, they got WAR. Some of our players, again, a lot of this stuff. It's really started integrating into our game the last couple of years. And some of these players have WAR. What's WAR? So evaluating, I think, goes back to the Billy Bean and the Moneyball book and that whole thing. And I was with Billy over there. So that whole premise was really about putting a number and a dollar value on a player. And really, the way Billy utilized it was in trades and looking at players more from a dollar standpoint than anything else. And because they were a low payroll team, they were able to maximize and find diamonds in the rough that maybe were on base percentage guys that they could take and maybe add a couple things to them and make their value increase. He did a lot with closers where he looked at the statistics of some 8th inning, 7th inning players and then turned them into closers that were pretty successful. And then he'd flip them for 2 or 3 players. So there's the statistical stats that way. And then there's, I think for us, looking at positioning is a big one for us, being able to run algorithms and put guys in shift positions and take away hits. I think today it's probably the hardest time in the history of the game to be a good hitter, and so then you look at launch angle and hard contact and exit velocity and all these things that we'll look at now. What I used to do, 20 years ago as a bench coach is, it'd take me 30 minutes. Now I'm looking at 5 or 6 hours to try to decipher through it. And a lot of the analytical guys are there to help us now to kind of to break down certain things or answer questions. But I think, if I had to break down hitting, what's the secret to hitting? It's get a good pitch and hit it hard. And I'm not making it, trivial that all these stats are out there. But sometimes we can dwell too much that, you're hitting 050 on that slider down and away. And you take away their strength of being good fastball hitters because now you're trying to make them hit that slider down and away. So it's a balance. I think you have to decipher that information and disseminate it, according to the way players can handle it. In the same breath, I think you have to get them to understand and not be afraid of statistics. An example is WARs is one of it is if you advance from first to second on a ball that's maybe fairly shallow down the left field line and you tag up and go to second, that adds to your WAR. Well, that's playing the game right. And then, the sad thing about the major leagues is guys are making money, and they're making money when they go on the ball in the dirt, when they steal the base, when they do these little things, along with hitting balls in the seats. And so that's what the WAR stat, wins above replacement, comes from. It's a way of evaluating players according to a dollar amount or where they stand against other players in the league. And you can use that to say, okay, look at, there's 30 shortstops out there, and here's where you're out on defensive metrics, and this is why. So, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to look, either it's positioning or, you're just not getting off the ball. You're taking too many pitches off. Wow. So, we use it in a lot of ways, and I think it's benefited our game tremendously.
Well, you've talked about this. Now, here's the part where I think the science meets art, and that is you've got all these different guys. They all come from different places, and so now, how do you, I think you're part counselor, right? Where you're identifying these guys and their where they're at, even with their own identity. So, are they, and maybe not, the word isn't soft as much as it is, they have this maybe image of their self that's not as strong as it could be, but it doesn't make them a bad player or a bad person. It's just who they are. How much of that is happening in the big leagues? I mean, is everybody there like a steel trap? Are they all able to handle the pressure, or does that vary?
It varies all over the map. There's guys that are very confident. There's guys that need to be pumped up every day. I'll give you an example kind of on data stuff. My son, and I use my son as an example because we get to live it every day, and he's going through the minor league system. And he struggled mightily last year with a lot of philosophies that maybe he wasn't ready to take on, whether it's scap load and whether it's listening to a guy like Donaldson, who's a very extreme, mature hitter, talk about mechanical techniques that maybe don't fit a guy that's not ready for it, or launch angle, and truly understand. I think there's a lot of half truths out there where you see something and you go, that makes sense on paper. But, if you look at the JD Martinez and the Justin Turners and guys like this, a lot of those guys had 2,000-3,000 at bats under their belt, whether it's college all the way through the minor leagues, before they made these adjustments. And so it's interesting though, when you look at body assessment, my son's and we really didn't know this until this year when we started looking at it from a different angle, and he's a very hyper mobile athlete, meaning that he has a lot of flexion in his elbow, and he has a lot of elasticity in his body. And so he'd get in a situation where he wouldn't load that elbow enough. He'd get from here and then he'd lay the bat back. Same thing, you'll see guys that some guys can turn their feet out, it'll benefit them. Other guys will turn them in, again, on hip mobility. So when we're starting to assess players that we never did 15 years ago on the way their body truly moves. And I was fortunate to go to Japan a couple of times, and they break players down in kind of a fascinating way. Not all of them, but one of the teams that I was with over there, they talk about A and B players. If you look at an Ichiro, who's a forward player, very fluid, out in front type player, Rod Carew type player, they classified those guys as A forward players. And then there's other guys like a Matsui, or in our game, a Brian Dozier, or somebody that's a real backside hitter, And so what I started to understand is that there's certain players, their body moves in certain ways. At shortstop, it'd be a JJ Hardy, who's more of a squatter, upright, backside shortstop. And then a Rafael Furcal would be a guy that kind of is a little bit more fluid and forward type play. The problem, and I guess the benefit of knowing that is that it kind of eliminates having one style fits all, one shoe fits everybody. And so you start to look at body movement and assess that and say, okay, well, is this style of hitting matching the way his body moves? So there's a lot of different stuff, some great, and again, you don't know that unless you're out there looking for it and you're trying to grow.
Wow, that's really good, man. So, yeah, lifelong learner, you're watching multiple players and different techniques, not being stuck into one specific, one size fits all. That's an amazing approach. It's hard though, I can remember coaching high school baseball. You got guys that are just really not ready for that. So I know as a high school coach, a lot of times we had certain things that we had as a system that we implemented for everybody. Now, obviously, everybody is different, but you almost have to do that if you're not skilled enough or know enough of these other techniques and can really assess, like you're saying, I mean, you're a professional coach. What would you say for a coach that's maybe at a lower level who doesn't have that kind of experience or doesn't know how to see that kind of difference or body type? What would you recommend a coach in that situation to do?
Well, and and I think it's funny because it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether it's T-ball or the major leagues. Somebody said this a long time ago. How do you know if you're a good coach? You get a lot of Christmas cards, right? So to me, it's don't, players sniff out, especially our level. They'll sniff out if you really know what you're talking about, right? Or you just read it online and you're trying to sell it. So to me, I don't ever worry about that I know the latest, greatest technique. That's where I was saying at the start of the podcast, I think it's important to really know how a player learns. Is he kinesthetic? Is he visual? Is he auditory? These are all things. Do you take the time to really say, why are you playing the game? What do you want out of the game? What do you think you're good at? Take the time before you just start saying, hey, you know what? We're going to work on getting that front foot down, and we're going to load that elbow, and here we go. So I think if you're confident in yourself, I think you got to gather that information. You got to know how players think and what they want out of the game. And, and that changes on a daily basis. I gotta feel the temperature of every player I'm around every day to see if, he's having a good day or bad day off the field. And that's just life, And so being that calming coach, being the guy that makes it fun, Woody talks about it all the time, our big league manager, it's about the process. If you can really enjoy the process, that goes back to John Wooden, let's practice the way we want to play, and then just play the game, but it's not about you as a coach. It'll never be about you. I got a trophy sitting back there because of Mike Moustakas, Eric Hosmer, and all the bullying, right? They did that. I didn't do that. I was fortunate to be in that dugout and watch those guys in a magical season. So I think guys want to get somewhere. They want to be head coaches, and they want to manage in the big leagues, and they want to do this. If you invest and you come to the ballpark every single day, and it's funny because you can break players down into 3 different categories: adders, neutrals, and subtractors. Somebody's going to fit in that. I always wanted to be an adder. I wanted to walk in that clubhouse. The first guy I saw, I wanted to make his day better. It might be just say, hey, how's your family, man? How do you feel? How do you feel physically? What can I do? Is there anything I can help you with? And then we'll get to baseball. And so I think it no matter what level you're at, and I think that's what happens a lot of times. You're not creative enough to keep these guys entertained, or that you don't have the passion to do it. You got to have passion, and you got to really care. You got to get goosebumps when these guys play well, and that'll make you, and again, you'll reap everything tenfold if you go with giving. What can I give to this club? What can I give to this player? What can I give to this organization? You'll get taken care of. But if you do it the other way, if you're trying to step on somebody's toes, or you got to show that you're the smartest guy in the room, it's difficult.
Wow. That's coming from a guy that's been around the game for 35 plus years. It's refreshing to hear that, Walk. I was listening to one of your podcasts here recently, and you said coaching, regardless of what level you're at, even at the major leagues, is about building better men, knowing that you're there for them spiritually, physically, all the above. It's about building trust. It's about mentorship. I couldn't agree more. And you just said it. You really just said it in a different way. But, giving, I mean, you feel like, when you see players that make it to the big leagues, or anyone who is successful like yourself in an arena like pro sports, that you're going to have to step on somebody. But you're saying that's not true. You're saying the opposite, and you literally have a lifetime of experience and success to prove it. That's really says a lot. So in terms of empowering players, what more can you add to that? I mean, you've said a lot. I mean, is there another? I mean, you want to succeed. You're a coach. You want to do better. You want to win. It matters because you think everybody's looking at your record. If your guys don't make the plays in the field, you're embarrassed. So what do you say to a young coach or somebody who's even, at any level? How do you coach them and help them?
Well, I think it goes back to education, and I always felt like if a player played for me and went on to play for somebody else, I didn't want that coach to go, "Who this guy play for? He didn't know the game." Right. And so you have to be able to educate these. And I'm not a big rules guy, and I'm not a big discipline guy, but I am a guy that tries to get these guys to let go of their egos and to play for something bigger than themselves.
Mm.
And when you can create that environment that guys will go to war, with your, and again, it's really funny when guys are making the kind of money at our level, and that it still applies. You don't
Mm.
win a World Series unless teams come together, and
Mm.
they're few and far between. I've been fortunate 2 different times to be part of World Series, but and there's another 18 years that I didn't get to the playoffs, right? So
Mm.
it's magical to feel these guys come together like it's a little league team,
Mm.
when they really, there's no pretense, there's nothing outside affecting them. I'll give you an example. Mike Moustakas hit 159 during the course of the season, and he was bitter. We sent him down, and he was mad. He comes back up, and the 159 didn't matter anymore. He hit 5 home runs in the playoffs,
Mm.
right? So what changed? Did his swing change, or did his mind change? And so I think part of getting guys to understand that the physical part of it, going out and taking 100 ground balls, and I've been fortunate. I've had Ichiro, it hits 5 times a day, or Adrian Beltre that takes 5 buckets of ground balls a day. But it's real important to understand that we focus from the neck up just as much as we focus from the neck down.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
I'm over there going, and I'm getting up at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. I'm going in the gym and I'm training, and then I'm going into the cage and I'm working on my swing. Well, what about the game? What about your mental approach? Because that doesn't matter, because as soon as you swing a slider in the dirt, do you throw out the window and start chasing bad pitches? And
Mm.
so we really focus on the total package, and that's part of education. Guys want to come to you after they swung at a ball that's 40 feet short and go, "Hey, what's wrong with my swing?" Like, well, you need a longer bat. You know? So you got to get them to understand that there's things that they can control, things they can't, and that's all part of teaching.
Wow.
And getting guys to understand that.
Well, that's great stuff, Walk. It really is. There's more to you than just baseball, and I've known that for a long time. I know about 3 or 4 years ago you started your own foundation, and even though this isn't a plug for your foundation, I want to bring it up because number one, you're a big league coach. I mean, when you go play to the season, a normal season, there's not a whole lot of time. And quite frankly, it's not something that's going to return. You don't know if it's going to be profitable. It's a nonprofit. You're doing things. You may have another business, but why do it? And along with that you know, is it worth it? I mean, why would you do it?
There's a lot in there. Number one, I think, and probably people won't understand why I say this, but it's almost in a selfish way, that I feel better for doing it. Right? It's addictive to help other people, and it kind of goes along the lines of getting players to understand, to be a good teammate. It's understanding that God gave you the gift to play the game, or gave me the ability. God blessed me to be able to be in this game for 35, 36 years and have a nice career and reap a lot of benefits from the game. And so you get to a point where you go, maybe it's time to really give back. And maybe it's part of the building better men is to get these guys to be humble enough to say, you were given this gift, and you were given this platform, this arena to have a voice. to help other people. You know, you're seeing it with some of the billionaires in the world now, whether it's Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. You know, they're pledging to give everything they got back. You know, I don't have that kind of money, but, you know, on the same note, you know, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be blessed to be in the big leagues and to be able to be in front of a camera or be in front of travel around the country to speak or to do some good. And so we started a foundation called WakWay. You can look at it at wakway.org. That's our foundation, and we started it to help to get younger players involved to give back at an early age. So when they do sign that big contract, that they're in a position to understand how all that works, and to think about where they want to make an impact in the world. And so we started doing a bunch of events for different players. We did one in New York with Brett Gardner. We did one in St. Louis. We gave away down coats, and we've given away backpacks, and then we started focusing more on nutrition. We've been really fortunate. Our game's changed a little bit for the fact that we have chefs inside our clubhouse, and we get inundated every day with the best nutritional products to make our athletes play better. And it kind of bothered me, the fact that, you know, other people don't have access to that. And is there a way? We know there's a massive problem in the world about waste. We don't need to grow more fruit, in a sense. We need to salvage or have a better system. And you're seeing it now where supermarkets are running out of stuff, or they're actually dumping stuff in Florida and California, where we don't have the support system to get it to the people that we want. So the WakWay Foundation is about waste and improving that whole system. It's about nutrition, to get that into the inner cities and the food deserts. We gave away 450,000 pounds fruits and vegetables, and you were a big help in that at one of the events, you know. So you know, and so we've started another program called the WakWay Foundation, or the wakwayfarm.org, wakwayfarm.org. And it's a legacy farm that we've had in our family. My grandmother passed away last year, and we're going to turn that into a nonprofit, educational, almost an entrepreneurial research farm. And so we're in the process of converting that, where we're looking to grow nutritious products that we can end up sustaining and putting back into the inner cities. And so anybody wants to get involved or to check that out, check out both those websites, and you'll get a little bit more about, you know, what we're about and what we want to do to try to help people.
Wow, that's good. We were fortunate enough to be here in Dallas when you did one of your events, and you know, the thing that I took away from it was, as you said, it makes you feel good to be able to give back, and it's part of who, you know, it gives us a great opportunity to not only as to feel good about ourselves, but to model it, as you said, and we really appreciate you doing that. And I know you've seen a lot of success with your foundation and doing things with food and hunger. We're really proud of what you've done. You know, I know we have a few more minutes, but before we go, I want to make sure I answer some of these questions. We have some really kind of some pretty good questions. I'm going to try to scroll through here and give you a couple of them. Might have to help me, Camille. Okay, here's one. It says, the best advice for how to deal with adversity in baseball as a team, more really about how to handle tough losses.
Well, I think it goes back to the process. You know, if you go in and say, hey, we got to win this, you know, we got to win this ball game, you're barking at the wrong tree. If we practice and we prepare for any situations, there's some things we can control, and there's things we can't. We can't control a bad bounce now and then, you know. And so all of a sudden we get a bad bounce, and everybody's dejected because we lost that ball game. But we ran 90 feet, and we played the little parts of the game. I remember talking to Brian Butterfield one year, who's been around baseball for a long, long time and is one of the best third base coaches in baseball. And I called him up one spring, because we both organized spring training. I said, what are you guys focusing on this year? He said, we're focusing on being the best backup team in baseball. You know, and you're like, amen. You know, just little things like that. And if you can get guys to understand having good at bats is about being locked in and not taking a pitch off. Woody talks about it all the time. He says, we cannot take a pitch off. if we take a pitch off, we let our teammate down,
Hmm.
whether it's in the field or whether it's, at bat. And so you can really feel good in a sense that your guys played well, even though you lose. And you'll be surprised at the end of the day, you'll win a lot more than you lose. And so
Wow.
it's, playing the game right and respecting the game, and that, if something angers me or gets me mad, it's not respecting the game, and being professional. And those are
Wow.
things that I don't think I need to, on this podcast, to define that. It's pretty simple, run to your position, hustle, give it everything you got. Those are things that are absolutes. We can hang our, we don't need to hang our heads at the end of the day on a loss if we play the game the right way. But we'll be on top for the long run.
Wow. Really good. What do you contribute to your success? Who in your life were those guys that maybe influenced you towards your success?
Without getting too emotional, my father is probably number one, and my grandparents. I have a storied past with my father being born in an internment camp, and my grandparents spending a couple years in the internment camps. And I had 4 uncles that fought in the 442nd, which is one of the most highly decorated military units in the history of the United States. Why their parents were locked up. So no bitterness, nothing about that, but the total respect for the fact that these people that were interned never talked about it, the humility, and then just got back on that horse, and were most of my family was very successful. So that legacy, I remember getting the opportunity to manage in Seattle. And that first day I was up there, I was able to take my grandparents before they passed. And to be in that office was pretty special, to say, you know what, you guys spent 2 years of your life in a prison, basically, for me to get here. So,
Oh, wow.
That's an emotional
Powerful.
story. I've been fortunate to be in good programs and good coaches along the way. I was fortunate to play all 3 sports with Jack Del Rio, who was obviously the ex Raider football coach, USC, Kansas City Chief, go down the list. Jack and I played all 3 sports together, so Jack was a big influence on the competitive nature and the success of getting a college scholarship, and just being a good friend at the time.
Wow. Wow, that's powerful. I mean, that
And I'm not going to leave out my
story.
family, because they've struggled with me and through a lot of moves through the years. So they've been great. So.
Well, Wak, you really have you have been a great mentor to a lot of young men who are probably older men now, some of them. But I just want to thank you again for sharing some of this with us. This has been absolutely amazing, just to hear your perspectives. To hear a little bit more about you and what makes you tick. I think we can now sense a little that the reason behind. I guess the thing I take away from it the most is, how does the success of someone, how is it measured, and when you can do something for that long a time at that high a level, there's something more than just luck. It's not just being in the right place at the right time. There's a sustained something that's just powerful about what you've done. And the words that come out or in my mind are, number one, humility. And you said it's knowing where you came from through your parents and grandparents, and seeing that modeled, and you're turning around and doing the same thing. So I just want to thank you for sharing that. Thanks to all the coaches that have been a part of this. This has been a blast for me. I enjoyed this. I was hoping, I was hoping to be out, on a baseball field somewhere, but,
I would have never thought I'd be coaching from a Zoom call.
Yeah, but check this out, Walk. I'm we can do this. I don't know if you can see this, but I figured I'd get some sprints, watch the guys do some sprints here. So
there you go, get your whistle out.
But hey, I even got one of your new stadium here. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Well, I want to thank you again. If you have questions and want to get more information about anything that's been talked about, please get a hold of us here at FungoMan. We're just want to help do what we do, and that is empower athletes and those that train them as they make their valuable contribution in the pursuit of excellence. This is what you do, Walk, and we appreciate you modeling that, sharing it with us. By the way, we have we're hoping to do this again. In fact, we're going to, on the 30th of this month, we're going to have a couple of guys that are in the amateur world, Trent Mongero and Nate Trotsky. Both of these guys are training young athletes that hopefully will go on, and many have to play professionally. But we want to talk to them about some of the things they're doing and get a feel for maybe what techniques and methods they're using. So stay tuned on that. We'll be emailing and posting on that. But again, I just want to thank all those that have been involved here. Again, this has been a great first run at this, and I hope you come back and tell your friends to join us next time. Thanks again, Walk, and you guys all have a great night.
Well, thanks for having me. You guys come back again. We'll do it. We'll do this again.
All right, Walk.
All right,
Take care.
Take care.